what are podcast guests and hosts still struggling with? What can we do to simplify it? And right now we're on this cycle where every 3 weeks we release an update. And none of them are huge necessarily, but it might be, hey, this button, everyone has trouble finding this. Let's go ahead and relocate that or change the color, right? And so we're making little things along with enhancements as well. And people are like, hey, I'd love it if it did this. We take that to the board and we just say, okay, I say the board, like the whiteboards is what we take
Yeah,
that to
yeah,
and
yeah,
decide. It doesn't make sense. We don't have like a board of directors. So I need to
yeah,
clarify
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But yeah, and the idea is just, hey, will this actually serve? If it will, let's add it and see what happens. Will it help everybody?
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And today is a very special day. I have a very interesting fellow. His name is Alex Sanfilippo, and he is an entrepreneur extraordinary, has quite a history behind him. He is also the CEO of PodMatch, PodMatch Global, and we will be talking about that and his background. Alex, welcome to my podcast.
John, thank you so much for having me, man. As I told you before we started recording, I've been listening to On the Brink for a while, and a lot today specifically. So feels like I've been in the room with you all day, and I'm just honored to be here, man. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being on my podcast. You are actually number 192, and hopefully before the end of the year, we'll have 200 podcasts. And the other thing that we do on our podcast, and as you know, and you're the expert as well on podcasting, obviously we'll talk about that, but I go right across the board. Don't have a particular topic. I podcast interesting people from across the world, and I really enjoy it, and I believe it is something that is at the very beginning and it's expanding on a daily basis, and I believe it is a media that will play a major role in everybody's life. So you are on the beginning of it, so am I, but so is PodMatch. So Alex, I know you started already very young as an entrepreneur, similar to me actually. You were only 10 years old and you already started becoming entrepreneurial selling golf balls. So let's start from there and then kind of go forward.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't paying Uncle Sam at that point, John, just so you know. But as a 10-year-old kid, I realized that a lot of the kids in the neighborhood were selling lemonade. That was extremely common, and I decided to give that a shot. I was like, I want to do that. Just had a feeling I wanted to try it out. And as soon as I did, here's the thing, I was different than most kids. And as soon as I started doing that, I realized this isn't profitable. Like I could do the math in my head saying, my mom bought this for $7 and now I'm selling it for 25 cents each. And here's like, I just did the math. And no other kid was thinking about that. They weren't thinking about paying their parents back. My parents never asked me to, but I still had in my head profit margins, right? And so I
Exactly.
stopped. I stopped the whole lemonade thing almost immediately because I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. There's nothing involved in this, right? At that time is actually when I discovered that the golf course across the street from where I lived had really bad players and they'd all hit the balls in the water. And I discovered they're really easy to get out of the water and these guys will rebuy them. And they were buying them for $2 and $3 instead of just 25 cents, right? And so that to me started what I consider to be my first business venture, if you will. And sure, I only did that from the age of 10 to 12. You can only get away with that as long as you're cute, right? Once
Sure.
you pass that, the golfer's like, give me that golf ball, kid, right? But at that point, I did really well. It was me and my brothers and a couple other kids in the neighborhood. And for me, I realized what I was good at in that moment. Like I always struggled in school. I wasn't great at video games and I was terrible at sports. So it was kind of like this weird place, right? But I did realize I was good at business. I was good at organizing a team, saying, you go find the balls, you clean them, you organize them in bins, I'll sell them with this person, right? And that was kind of my introduction to me realizing, more than it being a business, was me realizing what I'm actually good at. And entrepreneurship just is that thing.
That was in Florida, right? You were born
Correct.
in Florida, and which city again? Forget now the name of the city.
Jacksonville, Florida is where I'm at. And I was born and raised here. It's a huge city. So I've moved quite far from where I grew up. You can drive over an hour and you're still in the same city. Let's put it that way on how big it is land wise. So I keep
Wow.
on moving closer to the ocean is what I'm getting at here, John.
Right. And so from there on in, then if I kind of remember back, is that so you did that in your young years, then you went to college, but you were not overly successful there as well, right?
Yeah, actually, I really struggled through high school and then college was something I just thought I had to do. Um, but it was expensive. I had trouble affording it. And beyond that, I was working really hard and doing a really bad job. Like high school, you can fake it and get through it, right? And get a degree. And I was able to do that. But as soon as I went to college, it was like, man, now you got to actually be smart, right? And I just didn't have what it took. And I actually ended up dropping out of college because something about it just didn't make sense to me. I was like watching myself drain any savings I had from when I grew up. I've always been good about saving money and stuff like that, but I was spending all of it to get failing grades. And I was like, man, I remember telling my parents one day, I'm like, I just don't think this is for me. Like, like, I'm sorry, guys. And that was kind of like an interesting conversation to say the least. But yeah, I did a little bit of college, but ended up stopping because I couldn't seem to get the hang of it really.
So then I think that you started looking at real estate and looking at a niche there where you could, prepare people that are selling their houses and presenting them, and that became part of the next step.
Yeah, actually, I did some of that through high school and into college even. And what I was doing is I was making virtual tours of homes, which
Right.
now is very common. If you go in the United States, we use Zillow, and you can just kind of like drag your mouse, look around. But we're going back to 2003 when I started this. And
Was
at
not
that
being
point, I was
done.
running right. I was running a fully remote team. There were 7 of us, and it was interesting back then. That was two unheard of things: virtual tours of homes and entire remote teams. And again, that was actually a really good business venture that I thoroughly enjoyed. Really had a lot of fun with that.
Now, one of the things that I have similar to you, I was very aggressive too in business here, and I had acquired a business. I'm in the lumber business in particular, and I acquired a company in the next province over in Alberta, and I bought it in 2005, and then in 2006, I saw the market disappearing, and I sold it 8, 9 months later. And again, that has a similarity to you because all of a sudden you had grown the business, and all of a sudden, 2006 to 2009, I call it. In all the time that I've been in business here is about over 50 years, actually, close to 60 years. And I've seen 7 or 8 recessions, but 2006 to 2009 looked more like a recession depression, and I thought that's the worst we ever seen. And so all our companies that I already had were really, really delicate. We survived it, but I sold off the one, and fortunately I did, because it did not survive. You had the same kind of an experience. Maybe share that with us as well.
Yeah, so this is actually when I started going to school. So 2003 to 2006, that business, so doing virtual tours of homes, and I started investing in property as well. Just want to do buy and
Right.
hold, so rental properties myself. And
Yeah.
so that happened in 2006, the beginning of 2006. And so getting to 2000, like late 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, all of that just kind of fell apart. And that's when I was like, well, I need to go to school then. I need to like figure out like just fall back in line with what you're supposed to do, right? Because clearly this didn't work. And that was a tough time for me. And during that time, I actually got a job in the aerospace industry, just because I needed a job, right? And like you, actually, John, I don't know what business it was, but at one point you were the facilities guy at a company, and that's how I got in. I got in taking out the trash,
Exactly.
breaking down boxes, keeping the place organized, right? So you and
Exactly.
I do have a bit of a similar story, and I pray
We
to
do.
end up as successful as you are right now and beyond, right? But yeah, that was a tough time, and it took a lot of humility to say, okay, I'm not going to go to school. I'm going to jump into this job, and going from entrepreneur to person taking out the trash. That was a lot on me mentally. That's for sure.
So the other thing that happened, because again, these are things that go to the core of who you are, and some people, they would give up and then say it just not doesn't work for me, and I better go a different directions and forget about entrepreneurship and all of those kind of things. We all have been there at from time to time. In your case, correct me if I'm wrong, something else happened that was defining in your life, is that already you were working at the aero industry, and then in some point you got a flyer and that invited you to a meeting at a church group. And when I was reading that in your bio, and it was defining in your life, not only did you find your future wife there, but also changed you in terms of direction.
Yeah, going back to, like, where we're at in this point in life, think about it, like, 10-year-old entrepreneur, had a great startup when I was in high school, right? Started investing in property really young. I got from a worldly standpoint, I was doing very well. If you just look at
Right.
the average 17, 18, 19-year-old kid, right? And then I had this, which, there was no way for me to know, but the economy just took that crazy tank, right? And, at that point, that's a big shot to your ego, which I'll be real now, I can look back and in hindsight, I needed that because I would have ended up probably being not the nicest type of entrepreneur because it looked like everything I did just continued to snowball into more and more success. And that typically isn't a very good story for anyone's mental and physical health, right? So
Agree.
it was something that was needed, but I hit this low point where now I'm like, I'm working a part-time job as a receiving clerk, as we called it, taking out the trash, breaking down boxes. I'm failing in school, right? And so it was a really, for me, that I consider that the lowest point of my life. At that point, I remember I moved into one of my rental properties because I had to, or I was going to lose it. So I ended up moving into it, and I get this flyer in the mail, and it's for a church that's like, I looked at the address, and this is back before you just look it up on your phone. But I was like, this is literally right down the street. Like I could walk there. And I fought it for a little bit because I was like, I don't know if I really want to do that. And these people are going to judge me just like everyone else, right? Because at that point, I had lost a lot of other quote unquote successful friends because I didn't have the
Exactly.
money anymore, right? And it was very shallow. But I remember walking into this place and for the first time feeling like I was accepted, and also having this strange feeling that I was where I was supposed to be. And to keep that whole thing short, I don't want to go into too much detail on this, but basically, it's where I found Jesus, and I figured out that like there's more to life than just my worldly success. It goes far beyond that. And at that point, man, that was the most pivotal transformative part of my life, I would say, is stepping foot into that place and really just altering the course of my entire life from then on.
You found the support that you were looking for at that point there, right? And then
Yeah.
obviously also your wife, her name is Alicia,
Correct. Yep. Alicia.
Alexia. Yeah.
No,
So
Alicia.
the
Yeah.
yeah. So the other thing that I found interesting about it is that it got you involved there. You were still in the aero industry, and at the same time you were starting to dazzle with blogging and for those, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex here, blogging to means that is pre obviously where we are today is interacting on certain topics, usually in writing between different groups, and that then became a big part of what you were doing, and it kind of evolved in something much bigger, right?
Yeah. It was one of those things. I just realized I had a message. So I had been through it a tough time, and not that I had like arrived on the other side, but on the
Right,
journey, the pendulum had swung. And so for me, I was like, I want to start sharing this. And at first, it started off interestingly enough as me just texting a group of
right,
people. It was I think like 10 friends I knew that were struggling because just the depression of that recession, as you called it,
right,
was real. And so I was just texting like 10 people, and every day they'd be like, "Hey, can you add this person to your text list and this person?" And within a couple weeks, it was going to hundreds of people. And I started getting responses. People were like, "Can you expand on this? Like, this really spoke to me. What does this mean?" Because the texts are pretty short. And at that point, I discovered a website called WordPress, which just allows you to set up a blog where you can just write as much or as little as you want. So I just started posting every day my thoughts instead of it being a text message. I started doing it
right.
there. And I was writing 5 times a week, I'd say, realistically, which is, I'll admit now, is way too much. But it was me, actually, it was very therapeutic for me. It was me getting uh, through the things that I was going through and helping others along the way. And so
Exactly.
I really enjoyed that. So I just was blogging every day, writing on topics that were interesting to me. And my underlying like thing there, my agenda, if you will, was to help people find Jesus and to help them get through the trouble that they were facing. And that was
Right.
just something I did like as a complete side hustle. Like I still had the full-time job, but yeah, that's something I was doing and really liked.
Then that became very big, right? So it expanded and expanded and far beyond what you had imagined. And then at some point, it was sold and became a public company.
Yeah, so it was, yeah, I mean, at first it was just me, like I said, writing every day, and I realized that's not
Right.
feasible. And so I had other people that were like, "Hey, I've been through some stuff too. I want to start writing." And at one point, I don't remember the exact number, but I know it was just over 120 authors that were on the platform. And so that everyone was just kind of writing and sharing their journeys. There was a lot of content happening. And at some point, it was actually when I started getting into podcasting, I realized that kind of, if you will, like the grace had lifted for doing that. Like I just didn't have the capacity anymore because I still had a full time job as well. This was definitely a passion project for me, and the opportunity came for somebody else to take it. Uh, and their vision for it was so much bigger than when mine was. They had
Right.
more experience than I did. They could use it to help far more people. And at that point, the opportunity just came where I was able to pass it along to them. And I always like to say this, like I quote unquote sold it. For some reason, I never wanted to make a dollar with that, so I
Right.
made sure that didn't happen. So my profit was 1 penny on that because the rest was dispersed and given to other places and stuff like that. And that was just the passion I had for what I was doing at that season of my life. But I learned so much from writing, like learning to articulate what you're going through. I started podcasting at that point too, so I got my introduction to what I do full time now. Right, it
And
just helped me in
and
all areas of life.
that's the point, right? Alex is saying that you went through that, and you learned so much of it. Not maybe financial gain of millions or billions of dollars or anything like that, but more like the experience alone was invaluable, in my opinion. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, are we around 2018, 2019 now in your
Yes,
background? And
you know John, you know it is the numbers get fuzzy, don't they? I think, yeah, but
yeah, I
yes, you're
know.
right. 2018, 2019, yeah.
Yeah. So so what you then started looking at more, you know, and for the guests from around the world watching us here, podcasting as we know it today is still very new, really. Started probably with the concept of blogging, and then from there on in, the other part, I'm not sure exactly. COVID has been contributed, but the other part that I believe very much in is the same already that you saw on the blogging side of interacting between individuals. I'm quite a bit older than you are, as you know. I'm 83, and so. But but I see from a couple of generations, or even a generation back, where people interact directly. Doesn't happen all that much anymore now. We all go through either Google or Facebook or whatever other platform there is, or iPhones, and there is not very much direct interaction. Blogging showed that need or that demand or potential that then evolved into podcasting. And podcasting, relatively speaking, is pretty new. And then your entrepreneurial instinct must have led you on the way to, all of a sudden, this light bulb went on, and you got yourself what we call a whiteboard, and you started to look at how does this all fit. And a whiteboard, you have a lot of similarities to me. Is that in some cases I have the mental picture, I start to work it out, and then from there on in, it started clicking more. You probably already were watching some form of podcasting already and saw the biggest problem, and I experienced the same. I've been in the form of podcasting, even before the ones that I do now, I was, in pre-COVID, I was interacting with people in more of a regional level, and did about 35 of those. And the challenge was always to find the right individuals. And as you grow and expand, how can you bring those different people together? So, and that was the challenge for us. And then COVID came, and then obviously I was dealing with a local television station. That part ended, and then we said, well, what do we do now? Well, how about podcasting? So I started podcasting then. I had this apartment, beautiful apartment, so we started developing it as a studio, because we couldn't use somebody else's because of COVID. And then if you do it, you have to do it right. So we gradually, and I have good people working with me, obviously, and and we set up the right cameras, the right equipment, the right setting. That was something. I have a casual setting, as you know, and started podcasting like that. Then amazingly in our area, and we have about not like you have that many people, but still northern BC is a lot of people, and we have a lot of very qualified individuals. So we started working with them, and then I thought that I had an apartment in Vancouver, maybe I'll change that apartment around, and we'll set up another studio there, because there's then a lot more people. But the more I thought about it, and the more we looked at it, and the more we look at television evolve, like CNN, all of a sudden we see virtually becoming just like on the face-to-face, like you and me sitting here, where before it was kind of hoping for the best. Anytime you got something like that, there were hiccups, and this didn't work and that way, but it became smoother and smoother and better all the time. So we said, how about doing virtual, and we'll do it right from here, and that's obviously what we did now. And then the challenge was to find the right people as our circle opened, and bingo, what did we find? PodMatch. And we became members of PodMatch, and at the time that I thought, and that's why it is so unique having you sitting here with me, because I went through the thing, and I said to the people around me, both Scott and Andrew, I say we have to broaden the circle wider and wider, and so as we did, then all of a sudden our circle became wider, and now we are interviewing people from all around the world, and at the same time then, and when we come back to your experience, when in 2019, I believe your friend's name was that when you did your whiteboard and kind of laid out how does it work, how can we make it work, because it is blogging was one thing, but now all of a sudden it has to stimulate an interaction between guest and host, and then how does the financial thing work around it, and how does it become a business, and how do you make it work, and preferably like have everybody go to your page on a daily basis, because I'm going to see where my rating is and where the new guests are. So how did share with us watching you here, as that it was your friend there you're looking at, and I believe you have to help me with the name.
Jesse. Yeah, Jesse.
And you started looking at it and started to come off the ground, and very quickly it became obvious that you hit a sweet spot here, because all of a sudden the demand accelerated fairly quickly.
Yeah, first off, thank you for using PodMatch. I can't say thank you enough. You do such a good job with this show. And to shout out 2 episodes real quick, I got to take a side note to do that. You had Derek Johnson on, which was episode 162, and Mark Hirschberg, which was 159. Again, like I said at the beginning, I've been listening to your show. 2 amazing shows, and I just happened to look. Those are both people on PodMatch, and I'm like, man, they are just incredible human beings. So I recommend everybody who's listening to this, finish this episode and then go listen to 162 and 159 with Derek Johnson, Mark Hirschberg as your 2 guests. Just fascinating people.
And the other one I want to add, because I did one just today, and that was 191, and that was Dr. Ravi Hire, and an amazing individual, absolutely amazing, through PodMatch, and was one of his first shows through PodMatch, I think. But I again recommend him as an amazing individual, and I'll tell you some of the things that happened during a little bit later about this particular podcast, but highly recommended in my opinion.
Cool, yeah.
Anyway,
thank you.
So
yeah, so
I get very excited about this stuff. I do because I love it.
We both love podcasting. You know what's interesting? You're one of. It's very insightful that you connected blogging and podcasting, because almost no one has ever made that distinction between the two, but they're both built on the same underlying technology, which is called RSS. And I'm not going to get into the technical side of it. Most people don't realize it. They are literally built on the exact same thing.
Right.
So Yeah, it's just this is more or less the evolvement of what blogging used to be, and blogging still has power, yes, but nothing beats this. Like, I can share this with my friends and family that just wanna know more about my life and story, John, because you've done an incredible job interviewing me. People who know me might be like, "Wow, I never really knew that about you," because of the way this conversation has gone. You wouldn't capture that in something like a blog, and that to me is the power of podcasting. In 2019, as you mentioned, is where I really, really started realizing, "Hey, I think that podcasting, although it's young, is going to be the future." And it was
No
actually the beginning
question.
of 2020 when I spoke at a conference in Orlando, Florida, about podcasting. Is when I realized that tons of podcasters were having trouble finding guests, and tons of people who wanted to be guests were having a problem finding podcasts to be a guest on. And that's when I came home. So it was early 2020. I started just whiteboarding it out, and I had 3 whiteboards just full of stuff. And I was like, what can we do? And this will give the definition. So anyone who's listening is like unsure of what PodMatch is. This will describe it really well. But basically, what I came up with was: is there a way that we could create basically a dating app, but instead of connecting people for dates, it connects them for podcast interviews? So could the host tell us what they're looking for in a guest? And when the guest describes himself, could we make a match between those two through an algorithm? And that's exactly what we created. So the PodMatch allows you to connect as a podcast guest and host. You can message in the platform, you can schedule in the platform. You never have to leave if you don't want to, aside from when you get to go do the recording. But that's the exact idea we came up with. And I pitched the idea, and we went ahead and incorporated it same day. That was March 10th, 2020. And that was with me and my business partner, Jesse, 50-50 partners. We put $5,000 into an account, bootstrapped, and that was it. The rest was history. And on June 15th, 2020, we launched what I just described to you, PodMatch, connecting podcast guests and hosts for interviews. And not I've had a ton of failures along the way, a ton of side hustles that just didn't work. Obviously, I already explained 2006 to 2009, right? Some bad times for sure. This really clicked almost immediately, and for that I'm just so thankful. But yeah, that was kind of the launch of podcasting for like as a business for me.
Timing is everything, Alex, as you well know. It is everything. And then, in order for you to become successful, which you have, and it's still at the very beginning, at least in my mind, is that you would not have been where you are today if it were not for the failures that you had along the way. Because I've been there, I did all of that. And the amazing part now is that it is obvious in my mind that this is still at the very beginning, as you and me are sitting here interacting and speaking as friends that really face to face only met today, but you have been watching my podcast. And at the same time, you already know around the world, we have millions of people, thousands, tens of thousands, 20,000. We have had 1 million people watching some of our podcasts around the world. And so the amazing part about that is that it's not only you and me having the interaction, but a lot of people are sitting along the way watching us and feeling they are part of our conversation because they make those connections. And to me, what is important, and as you know already from my podcast, I share with the people my experience, of the ups and the downs. I had all the challenges along the way, and and that makes it so interesting. It makes it so personal, and it makes it so unique. I know several people that are listening to podcasts, ours or others, and saying, if I go here, there, or wherever I'm doing, I'm watching, I'm listening to podcasting. And, so it's still very much at the beginning. The other part that I was going to say is that it looks to me like it is evolving, and so likely correct me if I'm wrong, that you're looking at your model and your organization and saying, okay, what else do we need to do to become even more effective? And as you interacting with it as you do on a daily basis, obviously, saying, okay, make slight changes here, make slight changes there, and it's still very much a work in progress. But it is amazing. The PodMatch was the right model at the right time, and it will only become larger and bigger.
Thank you for saying all that. And really, we are constantly looking to evolve, and so we're always finding what's the next pain point directly involved with this, right? Like I'm not going out and starting something totally random, right? It's all within PodMatch. Okay, what are podcast guests and hosts still struggling with? What can we do to simplify it? And right now we're on this cycle where every 3 weeks we release an update. And none of them are huge necessarily, but it might be, hey, this button, everyone has trouble finding this. Let's go ahead and relocate that or change the color, right? And so we're making little things along with enhancements as well. And people are like, hey, I'd love it if it did this. We take that to the board and we just say, okay, I say the board, like the whiteboards is what we take that to
Yeah,
and decide. It doesn't make sense. We don't have like a board of directors. So I need to
yeah,
clarify
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But yeah, and the idea is just, hey, will this actually serve? If it will, let's add it and see what happens. Will it help everybody? And yeah, so we're really big on being able to do that. We want to remove the friction involved in podcasting. Because here's the thing: the amount of time that is spent editing a podcast or finding that guest or doing all the administrative work, that doesn't actually serve anybody. I mean, ultimately it does, but your listeners aren't like, I don't care that it took you 12 hours to find Alex, right? So the idea is, can we remove some of that friction and make the whole thing quicker so we can get it in front of people faster to actually serve them? And the other thing I want to mention real quick, John, before I turn back over to you real quick here, is something that you said is that my time is spent communicating with our members and things like that. A long time ago, I heard somebody say in their business, they did something different. They said, I'm going to do things that don't scale, do things that don't scale. And I've decided to build around me and the team things that allow us to scale without taking my time because I want to continue to be able to communicate. Like if you email me, I don't want it to be a personal assistant responding. Or if you message
Right,
me on social media, I want it to actually be me. And
right.
so we've made a point to do that. And a lot of software people will say, Alex, that's a bad move. That's not the right decision. But I through and through, I'm a community guy. I really care. And I find that the more in tune I am with our actual members, the better the product ends up getting because I actually know. So again, I've streamlined some of the things that most people say is what the founder should be doing so that I can do the things that quote unquote a virtual assistant can do for you. But again, I just have that conviction of I want to do the things that don't scale so I can make sure I really stay in tune with what's going on here. And so I've taken a very counterculture approach to this, but I love it. I'm not overwhelmed, and the company's still doing really well. So it's kind of, I'm glad you said that you see me involved in it because that is so, so important to me. Community first is the way I've really wanted to build this thing.
So the other part then, but becomes, I feel now that for all intents and purposes, I'm part of PodMatch. I need you to be successful in order to me to be successful, and to attract, to have people at the beginning when they say, I'm a little bit worried about that. Will this work or will that not work? I'm nervous interacting. I said, start gradually and slowly start watching others. And then once you get that comfort of feeling, everybody wants you to be successful as a podcaster. And step one then would be to join an organization like PodMatch, and so on that topic, maybe share with us a little bit about your growth pattern has been fairly rapid and still is expanding all the time, right?
Yeah. So day one when we launched, so going back to June 15th, 2020 is when we launched. I told my co-founder, Jesse, he's like, what do you expect? Because I need to build the software and the servers to prepare for how many people will join. I was like, let's just say we'll get 100 people in the first 2 months. And that was my actual estimate. I was like, we'll get 100 people. And we had over 1,000 join in the first 2 weeks. And he called me one day. He goes, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing. What are you talking about? He goes, you've had 1,000 people, or he's like, 400 people joined last night. I was like, what? And apparently people just start sharing about it. And if you think about it, like you said, John, timing is everything, which
Yeah.
I think if there's one entrepreneur listening to this that's looking for a really key takeaway, know that timing is everything. And here's why I say that. We launched on June 15th, 2020, which if you remember is really when the world shut down at that point, which
Exactly.
means great public speakers, people that were traveling all around the world, they just lost their stages. I'm
Yeah.
talking people that were charging hundreds of thousands of dollars for an hour presentation.
Exactly.
And somehow, when Alex, with no LinkedIn following, shared, I just launched this thing to help get podcast guests and hosts find each other. We had just flocks of these A-class, like world-class speakers joining, saying, oh, cool, I'm going to find some podcasts to be on, which attracted tons of hosts to join. And here's the
Exactly.
thing. If I would have done that today, I'm not saying it wouldn't have worked or been successful, but it would have been more of an uphill battle right now than in
No question.
2020. So yes, we just started growing from day one, which I, again, so thankful for. I obviously didn't have the foresight to know I was launching at the right time because let's go back to when I was investing in 2006, right? It just, I
Exactly.
was in the right place at the right time. And I thank God for that opportunity. And yeah, so from day one, it's grown. And obviously, law of diminishing return factors in, right? So like today, we're not having thousands of people sign up every day, but right now, as we're recording this, John, we have in the last 2 weeks broken every single record on PodMatch aside from most signups in a single day. Because again, going from 0 to 400 is huge, right? But every
Right.
day we're having more people sign up at a more rapid rate than before. More people logged in at one time. More interviews happen. All those records have been shattered in the last just couple weeks. And we're technically at the slowest time of year for podcasting, again, as we're recording this. So it's just like, man, like this is a model that's working. Let's keep on making it better and better and strengthen the community around this. And like you said, let me continue to level up as well. Like I learned from people like you, John. You Some of the stuff you've shared is just so insightful. And I know you've got the 3 books, Against All Odds, ADHD Unlocked, and Finding Your Passion, Living the
Yeah.
Dream. I mean, this stuff is like, for guys like me, this is the roadmap for us to get where you are eventually. So I thank you for that, and for realizing, hey, Alex, keep on investing in yourself so you can make this better for the rest of us, right?
And working with other people on pot matching and the ones that you quoted, but we had you're 192. Before the end of the year we'll be at 200, and then going beyond, and then the other part, which I believe is that I'm thinking, I'm sitting in your chair in a way and thinking, what else? Because I want you to be successful, because you're successful, I'm successful, and saying that it is important that on a daily basis I have to look at your website, because it will tell me things that are of interest to me, and that's obviously one of your objectives, is that it becomes part of our lives, the interaction, because it connects me to more and more people, the ones that I know and the ones that I don't know. Is that just today I was in the grocery at Costco, actually. Costco is here as well. I was at Costco and just picking up some eggs, and as I walked through Costco, and there are hundreds of people floating around, and this one guy comes up to me and he said, "I like your shows on podcast." I said, "Okay." Well, can you believe it? That is
Wow, that's wild. I
in the
love
middle
that.
of Prince George, and so so the key is to bring so many people together. It's not just the two people interacting; it's all the other ones around us, and saying, "I like this because it gives me the opportunity to share our lives with other people, direct or indirect, from around the world." That's why, as you, and thank you for mentioning it, I'm a late bloomer, so I was not, as you likely already know, I was not very successful in school. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And he said, "Well, what are you doing with this guy? Do we send him to the mentally challenged school, or should we get him a career of some sort?" And I became a furniture maker, and then we were the other part that had a main effect on my life was I was born November the 1st, 1940, in Holland, and during the start of the Second World War, and times were tough and difficult, and even at that age, at around 5, I saw far much than that we should not have seen. And today, if we watch the news and we look at the struggles in the Ukraine and then the Middle East, then we are so fortunate in North America in living where we are living, that that the effect of wars. A lot of people think that when the war is over, then everything goes back to normal. No, that's not how it is. It goes on for, in some cases, more than one generation, actually. And and for myself, I was affected by PTSD, by the inner child. Had counseling for the inner child, actually, well into my 50s. And then the other part that you mentioned, and I always take the opportunity to talk about that a little bit. The one book that I have, as you know, is Against All Odds. And it's not hurrah, hurrah, John, but it's more like going through all the ups and downs and staying the course, never giving up, and then always having that entrepreneurial thing about, I'm going to send you signed copies of these books to you today or tomorrow, and and I make the connection to you because even when I was young, I sold newspapers. I delivered newspapers. I did all these other things. I always had money, and not much, but I always kept hustling and doing things. And then at one time, I found an old single shear plow that was old, and I sold it. And I think I was about 12. And I always still remember that the police was at our door, and they said, "Yeah, is John home?" "Yeah, John is home." And Jan was my name in Holland. And so then I came to the door, and obviously they had this all set up. It was my parents, and I thought, okay, the police, yeah. And then say, "Well, did you take his plow?" And it was said, "Yeah." And they said, "Did you sell it?" I said, "Yeah, I got 5 guldens for it." So they would just think, he said, "You can't do that," blah blah blah. Anyway, so already then I was entrepreneurial, and then obviously from there on in I started working, and the key point in my life was likely April the 12th, 1945. We were liberated by the Canadian Army, and the winter in 1944 and 1945 was called the Hunger Winter. And it was the coldest winter on record, and I still today, even Alex, still feel the hunger feeling. And me, my brother, my sister, that were 1 and 2 years older than I was, on a daily basis we would go with gunny sacks to the railroad yards, pick up anything edible or burnable, and and the reason that we did is because the Germans would kick us probably, but not shoot us. And the following morning we'd be back. But it made such an impression on me of being liberated by the Canadians that I always knew that I would go to the lands of my heroes. And then I finally did when I was 23, and I wanted to start with nothing, because obviously academically I was not overly successful. And in Holland the way it works is that you get married, you get a house and a career, and then one of the first things they do is saying, "Okay, where are your diplomas?" Well, I had no diplomas, and I felt I had failed, and I was still optimistic, but I still deep down felt that all my friends had gone to college, university, and were also successful, and I felt I had to prove to me, not to anybody else, to me, that I could do it. And and then I was going to go to Holland when I was Canada when I was 17. My parents wouldn't let me, and I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force, and then I finally won when I was 23, I wanted to start a lumber mill, and the timber is in BC, and so I couldn't speak the language, didn't know soul, didn't have a job. I started with 1 suitcase, 3 books, and 2 sets of clothes, and I had $150 Canadian when I left Amsterdam, and so I knew I wanted to go to BC. And then when I came to Vancouver, BC, I went to the immigration department, but I couldn't speak English, but there was a German fellow working there, and I told him what I wanted to do. He said, "Prince George, that's the boom town, that's where you have to go." So I came off the bus, the Greyhound, about 3 blocks away from where I'm sitting today, and I had my suitcase, and I had in my pocket exactly, I counted it 3 times, $25.47, and no job. But what I did have a lot of is attitude. I always will be positive. No matter how bad the day is today, I'll swear it'll be a better day tomorrow. I had passion. I give it all that I got, no matter what I do. And then work ethic. I work harder than anybody. And what will follow is success. And so I started there, and as a cleanup man, and then gradually worked my way up. And within a year and a half, I was the superintendent of one of the largest sawmills here in the region. And then 10 years later, now in 1975, I started the Brink group of companies, and we have. And I'm not here to say big company, and I've been say successful, but I still, even then, Alex, I felt I had failed. People would say to me, "Oh, you got all these companies and you're success." I didn't feel that way. I still felt I had failed. And it was not until January 1997 when I was 57 years old that I went into a bookstore, and as I went into the bookstore, and I still don't know for what reason, I opened this book, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction, and it's talked about ADHD. I had no idea what it was, and the more I read about it, and the book, and then I said, oh my God, that's me. So I wrote inside the book in Dutch, because I was ashamed of it, because it implied mental issues. Now I finally know who I am. And then for the next 3-4 years, I started checking out on Google, get more to know about it. And then after 5 years, I went to our personal doc. Can you imagine that? I delivered our daughters, was a personal friend of mine after 5 years. And he said to me, hey, John, why are you here? I said, I think I got ADHD. And so we looked at it together. Yeah, I do. So now, skipping forward, I call it a superpower. And so then the other part that I did, and I know you're a public speaker as well, and have done a number of other things. The other thing that I did, I was not very good at interacting with others, Alex. I was okay in my business, but anything outside of it, I was self-confident. I lacked self-confidence in interacting, and so so somebody, ex-sister-in-law actually, dragged me to an organization called Toastmasters, and I said, okay, but what do they do there? She said, you just sit down and then you listen to what they do, and maybe you like it, and you come back, and I said, as long as they don't ask me any questions. I said, no, they're not going to ask you anything. So I was sitting there in the middle, and halfway through this thing, they said, and hey, John, tell us a little bit about it. I said, oh my God, no, I'll never go back here. I stayed there for 10 years, and I became a distinguished Toastmaster on the top. And as you likely know, in Toastmasters, there is probably 450,000 at least people that are actively involved in Toastmasters, probably another 10 million around the globe that have had exposure to it. Probably less than 1% of it go as high as being a distinguished Toastmaster. For me, that was important because it changed my life. Between the war in Holland, that was tough and difficult, and going to Canada and starting with nothing to show to myself that I could do it just as well as everybody else, and then starting from the ground up, and then seeing then going to Toastmaster in 1990 to 2000 was another link that changed my world, and then reading the book from Dr. Halliwell, again, Driven to Distraction. He wrote that in 1990. Now, the interesting part is I'm podcasting him in the next week or so, Dr. Halliwell, to Full Circle, and again contacted on podcast, by the way, and that changed my life. And then since that time, that's why I'm saying I'm a late bloomer. I became an author. I'm apparently a very good writer. And I knew that always. I've always been good with numbers, and and obviously I've been very successful as an entrepreneur. I believe I have an obligation to speak about it and to write about it. And like ADHD Unlocked is a book that you can pick it up anywhere and start anywhere in the book, go forward or backwards, and it will maintain your attention. The other part about it is that a lot of people think that ADHD, 8% maybe of the population is affected by it. I believe it is more than 20% of the population, if not more than that. And that the other reason for other people to become aware of it, not only read my book, but also read other people's, like Dr. Halliwell and others, is that you will encounter people that are ADHD in either your family circle or your friends or the broader circle where you work. They tend to be slightly different, but it's a superpower, and it'd be interesting, and they are go-getters, and a lot of people that are successful entrepreneurs affected by ADHD. And it goes even further than that, and that's why I want you to take a look at 191, Dr. Ravi Hare, that probably 3/4 through the podcast that I did with him, he mentioned he is ADHD. Unbelievable. And, and so so the point that I'm making is simply that I love the podcasting that we are doing from around the world. It will expand and it grows far beyond where it is right now. It's still at the very beginning, and it gives people like me and others interacting much broader on things that I deeply believe in. For me, it's not about making a lot of money. That's not what it is about. It is simply being able to interact, and I do, public speaking, but this venue is much more expanded beyond where it used to be and where it is now and where it will be in the future.
John, I love that you just broke down your story. It's so inspiring. I know Against All Odds is it's like an autobiography, right? So it goes into a lot of that, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, I just,
Everything.
again, I love that. One of the things I've heard you say is live old but die young. And I think that in order to really do that, you have to be willing to get out there and share. And it can't always be about money. Because I find that people that are all about money, they die young, they live old, right? They're just like, it's the opposite. And I think that as long as we're giving back, we're educating, sharing that story, and I think that's so powerful, because you could have easily just shared that same story with none of the failures, but then doesn't
Exactly.
relate to anybody. Like you failed along the way, I failed along the way, and I'll be real. The first time I got on a podcast, I was so nervous to share that, because I'm like, who's going to want to hear this? And now I realize
Exactly.
that's humanity. We all have more failures than successes, but it's what we do after that that makes a difference. And you're just living proof of that. That's why to me, you're a huge inspiration for what I do. And it's just so cool to see how you've just snowballed those things into serving others and leveraging more for other people too. And nothing you do is for you. Like, it seems to be for other people. And I love that.
And the other thing that I did is, and that's an inspiration for me as well, is that I gave a presentation to a group of school children up to about 14 or 15 years old, and it was about 60 of them or so, and I gave them all a copy of my book, Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream, because there's so many people that don't like what they are doing. Or I ask young people and say, what do you want to do for a career? I say, well, I don't know. So and I say, well, check out some of the professions, and people are always willing to interact with you, and that sort of a thing. And then the other part about it was that during that presentation that I did, I gave everybody a copy of my book, signed every one of them. And to me, it's not necessarily selling it, but sharing it with them. And then it gave me the opportunity also to talk about ADHD and this, it's not all about success, but staying the course and being successful. And after I did the presentation, and I love to do that work, especially with young people, but also with others about different topics, entrepreneurship and and all those things. And in this case, about 4 or 5 of the young kids came after to me and said, I have ADHD. I said, oh, good, I'll get you a copy of my book. And it's a superpower, but that part, I believe, is very, very important, Alex. And I'm going to send you copies of this one. The other one that I'm doing is coming out next July, is Living Young, Dying Old. And the whole point is that quality of life. It's not about age, like I'm 83. I got lots of energy. You've seen that already, and I'm still writing books, and I'm still managing 10 different companies. I'm a public speaker. I do a lot of podcasting, probably one of the most active ones, and I love to do all those things. But at the same time, what is important is to stay fit and healthy, mentally, physically. Stay physically, I nearly died at one point in 2008, and then that gave me kind of the message I should take healthy living a little bit more serious. So in terms of diet, went to the gym, hired a trainer, and then at about 6, 7 years later, somebody said to me, "Have you ever thought about competing?" And I said, "Me?" And so I started competing, and then I did that here, and that well into my 70s, I became the second on bodybuilding here in Prince George on bodybuilding, and third in physique. That qualified me for the provincials. Came third in physique in bodybuilding, second in physique, qualified me for the nationals, and qualified me for the Arnolds. And then COVID came, obviously, and now I'm training again at 84, and again I want to end up at the Arnolds, and Arnold already knows him and me are gonna post together when I get that. And so that's what the point that I'm making is not for everybody, and that comes to the book. Everybody doesn't have to go quite as far as I do, but at least stay healthy physically, and even if you walk 20 minutes a day, stay fit physically, half an hour, and and then from there on in, be careful about diets, and that's what the book is all about: living young, dying old. And the other thing that I found interesting, a book was written, just came out on December the 5th. By I think it was Dr. Michael. Anyway. So one of the questions that was in there that caught my attention right away, I bought the book, is that that of 100 biopsies that were done on people that passed away, not a single one of them died of old age. That's fairly amazing, and it certainly got my attention. And so all those things like diet, staying fit and healthy, is that I plan to live till I'm 120. So
I love that. You got to take I'm going back in the logs here. You had Katie Carter on the podcast, episode 129, who talked about taking a holistic approach to health, which is what you're sharing here. It's about, like, if you just did the fitness and ate garbage, right? Or mentally you didn't take care of yourself. Like, for you, writing and podcasting is obviously not just good to serve others, but it's also therapeutic for you, right?
no
Like, if
question.
you're not doing these things, like, no offense to you or to anyone listening, like, you're not going to make it that far unless you have this holistic
Exactly.
approach of how do I keep this whole thing driving forward. And
Yeah.
I mean, again, John, I don't mean to, like, sound repetitive, but you really are an inspiration in this space, and, like, I have no doubt I'll be around celebrating your 120th birthday with you, so I'm excited for it. I hope I get an invite. Let's put it that way.
Excellent, Alex. I love having you as my guest, and obviously I want to stay in touch with you, and thank you for being on my podcast. And for those watching around the world, check on PodMatch. For those that aspire to do more interacting with others right now, this is one of the medias that is being very, very effective. It's growing. Obviously, Alex is driving it with his team, and I highly recommend membership to podcast. Alex, I send you the books. They will go out today, and let's stay in touch.
John, thank you again for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex. Take care.